Thank you all for joining us for Big Picture's Increasing Productivity and Profitability webinar. I'm Adrienne Palmer, Editor-in-Chief of Big Picture Magazine. I would first like to introduce our speakers, Troy Downing from Ape Wraps, Mike McGrath Jr. from All Pro Stickers, and Jay Sato from Primary Color. I would also like to give a big thank you to our sponsor, Oki Data. During this webinar, I will ask one question at a time and then give each speaker a chance to respond.
The first question for Troy is, tell us briefly about your background and your start in the industry.
Well, as far as our family, we were involved in the hot rod and vehicle upfit business. That's some 40 years ago when we started. So obviously custom paint was part of our daily lives. One of the things that we found here, 13, 14 years ago, was that the ability for us to actually digitally print. So all of those custom paint jobs that we either dreamed about or we found that we couldn't physically and or time or money would offer us the ability to spend the money on creating a paint job that was only 60% of what we expected. Here we find that digitally printing it, we could create instant gratification for ourselves on all of those types of paint jobs that we could have done years ago. So now we can experience all of those ideas in real time now and instant gratification. So fast forwarding to where we are today is we're able to create things that we would have never ever been able to physically do before. So obviously the majority of industrial print and point of purchase and that really wasn't what piqued our attention in digital print. What piqued our attention was that we could simulate paint with vinyl now. So that's where we were, and that's where we are today. So we're very excited to be in the large format print business.
Mike?
Well, I started as a screen printer for a family friend when I was 18 years old and worked for him for a number of years. After about 6 years, I kind of figured that I wanted to do something on my own, but I didn't want to necessarily compete with him because he was a friend. So I bought a plotter, and I started just by plotting stickers. Through the natural evolution of the sign industry, I went to a cartridge-style printer and then ended up with a number of inkjet printers and just grew the company from there. So that's how it all began.
Okay, yeah, my name is Jay Sato. I'm the CTO at Primary Color. We're a graphic services provider in Southern California and basically serve the U.S. and some parts of Asia. I started in the industry when the desktop publishing boom was, kind of a Mac kind of nerd, and started with the current company about 23 years ago and started originally as doing pre-press and just went up through IT and R&D, and now I'm helping the business managers have success.
Slide 1, please. How does a print shop know when they are ready for the next level?
So from our perspective, we think that there's many different ways you can interpret next level, but in terms of like revenue or going into new markets, we think that one of the drivers is basically sales and looking for opportunities in the market. And then when those opportunities are identified, then a new level of production would be determined by the demand. So once the demand is there, then obviously you need to ramp up production to accommodate that. Also, new technologies can provide disruptions, and that doesn't exist. Of course, there's always the companies themselves creating opportunities. And we know when all those things kind of come together, I think that's when you think you can be ready for the next level. Another example is we had the fortunate opportunity of having the planets kind of line up, and we were able to open up a shop in Shanghai. So we saw some opportunity outside of our geographic area, and a lot of challenges opening up a business in another country, but something that we started a couple years ago, and it's really proving to be a really good move for us. So some of the things from my perspective that I see about going to the next level.
Okay, so this is the big million-dollar question. I mean, if we knew when we were ready to go to the next level, it would be just real easy to pull the trigger. So some of the warning signs that we looked for were, did we have so much work? Were we so behind on the work that we had that we couldn't accommodate the customers that we had in a timely manner? And were we getting constant requests for something that we couldn't do? And was that work maybe going to another shop? Then was there complementary work, such as stuff getting cut on a router or CNC cutter, that was maybe going to another shop when we were losing digital print because of that? So for us, we initially were getting requests for a lot of 8-foot by 10-foot step and repeat banners. So when the request got to be enough where we needed another machine our next step then was to buy a 104-inch printer to complement the 74-inch one that we had. Then we purchased a CNC router with an oscillating cutter to complement the flatbed printer that we had. So a lot of it is complementary, and a lot of it is just being able to increase production that you're already doing, as in adding an additional printer.
Okay. I want to speak to this question as far as the mom and pop shop looking at a value-added program, a evolution, so to speak, in their business. Obviously, identifying the business that's in your own backyard, I think, is the key element to success anymore. Going out and competing with some of the larger shops and that type of thing may not be the proper focus of going to the next level, but identifying within your shop how much bandwidth you actually have. And whether that is in the vehicle wraps business or flat surface, large format printing, obviously speed has a lot to do and quality has a lot to do with your growth. But probably the biggest thing that you need to look internally on is all the gates in production that go with some of the what might be considered on the surface of a value-added program. So just buying another printer or a faster printer like the color painter, that may not be the entire solution to your increased productivity. And to the point as to the other guys of what they're saying is that comes with a lot of baggage. So you want to make sure that you're ready to, when you make that evolution, you've got all the keys to that success, whether that is understanding the gates in production when it comes to design, the communication with the clients. In essence, it's imperative that you understand what comes with the next level. And a lot of that has to do with training. So just plugging in equipment may not be the entire solution to success here. It is about education and knowing what that growth looks like before you pull that trigger.
Great points.
What specific thing or things have you or your company done to position yourself to be more productive or profitable?
Yeah, so going back to what Troy was saying about just it's not simply a matter of just putting down the credit card and buying equipment, although we hope that it was that easy sometimes. But some of the things that we've done to keep things going and keep things profitable is making sure that we have the right focus on people and the company culture. We've implemented a quality program, extensively leveraging color management, because we know that we got to do it right the first time, and that obviously has a significant impact on productivity and profitability. Making sure that the existing equipment, the stuff that we already have, is maintained and operating optimally, so we're just getting the most out of what we've already invested in. Making sure that the IT infrastructure is in place, because obviously if IT is a foundational technology and it's infrastructure, and if it's not going as fast as it should be, then that's going to have a negative impact on profitability. We like to subscribe to a continuous improvement philosophy so that we're always looking at things, we're never satisfied with the status quo. And finally, after all that, the investment in faster, more productive equipment or high-quality equipment comes next.
Well, what I'd like to address on this is, so we basically started as the home-based shop, and we're geared towards wholesale print. We were trying to create print for shops that didn't necessarily have printers. Back when we started, a large portion of the shops just had vinyl cutters. So we started with purchase of inkjet printers when that was a relatively new process. So what we've done to position ourselves was to try to always have technology that was on the forefront of what's going on, and that is keeping an eye on the trends in the business and what's happening and what's coming out next, and is it something that is a huge step towards what's going on right now. So, for instance, when we purchased our first color painter, one of the big differences was it was an 8-color machine versus most everybody having 4-color machines. And the size was a little bit bigger, and the speed was far and away faster. So those three things basically helped position us to get us in a better spot and become more profitable within the same footprint that we already had. So the great part about this is you never want to become complacent. You always want to look for that next thing that's coming. And is it just going to be a fad, or is it something that's going to change the industry?
My take on something specific to be more productive, profitable, really is for your ability to streamline your operation. And streamlining an operation for production, and again, I'm going to refer back, I'm going to take this area that is my sweet spot, is for the small sign shop / wrap program for vehicles. There's a lot of room for evolution, but at the end of the day, if you have not cleared up and cleaned up all of your gates in production, it's very difficult to streamline to provide a level of growth that's going to increase productivity, because if you have a gate in production and design, that will affect the rest of your business all the way through to the final finished product. So obviously you need to look in each box, whether it is design, whether it is in your printer selection, whether it is in your equipment selection across the board. I mean, even to back up and call out your design software. For a lot of us, there's a lot of different design software out there, but to streamline some of those things, it's going to be imperative that you get that cleaned up so that when that higher volume comes to become more profitable, you're positioned and you're ready for it. Your facility's ready for it. Your employees are ready for it. Your client interface is ready for it, because obviously growth has to do with more volume, and more volume will put pressure on your facility. So if you don't have your ducks in a row, it may not be worth putting your foot in that pool.
What should be critically important for those looking to increase productivity?
So streamlining, for sure. I mean, I think one of the first things I would point out to our team is just always look at the process and see if there's ways to improve the process. And when it's improved, look at it again. I mean, again, it goes back to the continuous improvement philosophy, where we don't really want to be satisfied with what was done. We want to constantly improve it. And I think there was some mention about changes in technology and really large changes. Yeah, I mean, that allows us to continually look at the stuff and leverage what's most recent and the latest trends and things like that. Another thing is team communication. We make sure we have really good crossover between shifts, and that everybody knows what's going on. The night shift knows what to produce, what some of the things to look out for that the day shift experiences. We want to make sure that the teams are working well together, so we try to put teamwork type of goals and things. Again, quality, I think we always want to make sure that quality is at its best, so that it's just done right the first time, which includes not just the production equipment, but really understanding what the customer's expectations are. If we do invest in equipment, we need to make sure we understand the financial constraints. So therefore, it's always tempting to just get the coolest, fastest thing, but obviously you need to make sure that it's a financial fit for your company. And also, in all of these things, we just never want to lose sight of the objectives of the company, whether it be productivity, financial, or even if it's cool factor. And I'm not going to say that a cool factor is not the right reason to invest or to change something, but we just want to make sure that those types of decisions are in alignment with the rest of the company's goals.
Well, I'll speak a little bit to a couple things on this. The easy answer to increasing productivity is to just simply say faster machines, but it's really not going to be faster machines. I think the biggest thing that comes into play here is a couple different items. Do you have the right people to run the machinery that's in place? Are they knowledgeable? Can they use the machines to the way they're supposed to be properly used to their capabilities? And do you have the right footprint for that machine? If you're cramped into a really small space and you don't have the space to let the material outgas or have the right amount of table space needed to lay out a banner so you can hem it good, are you fighting yourself by having to spend time by moving stuff in order to create space for the next step in what you're doing? At that point, then you have to balance. Do I need to change the footprint of where we're at? The easy answer is to say, to be more productive, you want faster machines. But I really think that's one phase of it, but I think it's probably the least amount versus the people in place and the right footprint to run it.
I want to echo what Mike just said, and obviously what is just transpired in just the last 10 minutes. We could play on this for days on how important the idiosyncratical parts of what we're talking about are and how important each aspect is. But this is a really great question, is increased productivity. If you go to a trade show and you're going to say, hey, I want a faster piece of equipment, hey, it exists. I mean, it exists in the color painter. And for many people that are looking at making the evolution to an industrial piece of equipment like the color painter, you better be prepared for that. For some of this old equipment that exists out there, first or second gen equipment, we're talking about 4 times the productivity in the same footprint. And like I mentioned, is echoing what Mike said, faster comes with baggage. I mean, just because I'm faster and I can turn and burn this stuff, the outgassing is only an issue that we are used to. And the reason that we select solvent-based equipment is because we're outdoor durable across the board. Some of the other types of equipment out there is there might be some elements of instant gratification, but at the end of the day, the three of us, we're not in the fast food business. We're in the durability business. Whether you're going to use it for 2 days or 2 years, we know what's going to come out of our facilities are going to stand the test of time. But through sheer productivity and increased speed, you can't give up quality. You've got to make sure that you're prepared for what's about to come down the pipe. You've also got to consider those materials that you're using. Just because I can go quicker, faster, and better, if I've went the low road on some of my materials, it could actually compromise the speed that I'm at and cancel out some of that increased productivity that I have. So at the end of the day, speed is awesome, but you've got to be able to maintain all the rest of the facets of your production to meet the speed of that printer.
What advice do you give to others about maximizing revenue or profitability?
Clearly, I think as this conversation is going, revenue and profitability are just not about a single machine or even a single aspect of the business. Really, it has to start from the top, and there has to be a certain philosophy about it. And when you implement certain machines, maybe a procedure in a certain department, or you're making some changes, just to make sure all that is in alignment with the top level of thinking about where we need to be with revenue and profitability. Some of the things that our managers, they tell their teams is make sure you avoid waste, because waste just can't be undone. So we want to do it right the first time. So right then and there, we want to just cut down on the X% of waste and just make that something sellable product that's fit for use. Also, you want to make sure you understand the market needs and sell on your strengths, and always, without a doubt, always deliver on your promises. Mike was also mentioning using your machines to its fullest, and I think that's also a great opportunity, because I think a lot of times we get new equipment, maybe we put it into production right away, and we all know we're really busy, we're fighting fires and just trying to get work out. Sometimes we don't take advantage of all the features that the new equipment brings us, so we just like to revisit that every once in a while with our vendors and talk to them about maybe some of the pain points that we've had. And we've gotten some advice from Oki. Hey, you know what, this latest update, you guys should try this because it's going to solve some of your problems. So I think having that relationship with your vendor is also important and can impact positively revenue and profitability.
A couple things come into play with this question. Once again, everyone kind of looks at this, and I think everyone's immediate response is maximizing revenue, fast machinery. And once again, I think it's more of a people question. If you really want to maximize what you can do, sometimes what you need to do is just slow down a little bit, because there's a lot of time that goes into ripping files, preparing files to get them ready. And if it's a huge wall mural, say that we are ripping and getting ready to print, and it might take an hour or longer for it to rip, let's make sure that we're sending the right size over. Let's make sure that we have the panels that have the right amount of overlap if it's a wallpaper job. So maximizing revenue sometimes is making sure that the people and the processes that you have in place are the most effective that you can be. And once again, kind of going back to what we were saying before, is this is an area where you don't want to get complacent. You always want to be learning. How can I be more effective? How can I streamline the good process that we have now and make it better? We all have room to improve, and it's a constant learning thing. There's really no position that we're ever going to get to where we're going to say we are maximizing our revenue, because I think there's always something that we're going to be able to do to tweak it to hopefully become more profitable.
Obviously, the two of you have pretty much answered that is the best it can be answered. But I will say and add to this that optimizing your employees' efforts, and if that requires additional training for your people to, maybe there's been an old way of doing business that should be revisited. There's a lot of new tricks in the cabinet now with the advent of the faster machine, like the color painter. The color painter is still the industrial platform, but it's been redesigned to the point where if I have a nozzle that goes out, I can turn another one on in its place. Well, There are people that I've spoken to out there that didn't even know that, or it was forgotten, or it was lost in translation over the years from one employee to the next. So I think the increase, keeping up with what the trends are, what is going on with your equipment, and optimizing the efforts of your employees is one of the most important things that you can do to maximize your profitability. But I will say, though, that your material selections play a big role on whether you're putting $100 bills in your pocket or you're putting them in the trash can. So sometimes the low road on materials that I'm saving money on the front end, you may be paying for it on the back end. So it's worth looking down the premium path, because there may be savings in time and effort that will compensate for where you've been trying to save money on the front side.
How do you balance production speed and quality? How can it impact profitability?
Just going back to what Troy said about materials, that's really a key, because that's a hard cost. And we've even gone to the length of putting a team together that looks at materials. They meet once a week. They found something on trade shows or just doing research, or whatever reason, we come together and we decide how we're going to test it. We see what the costs are, and then we put a plan together and putting it into production. So materials, obviously, super important. But in general, we want to make sure that you understand what part of the market you're targeting. There's some markets that just don't need super high quality. They would rather have fast and lower cost. And more specifically, it's very important to understand what the client's expectations are. So obviously, if quality expectations are high, then print at high quality. If quality expectations are not that high, then leverage it and print at a higher speed. But not doing either of those two will obviously impact profitability, because it's not the right fit. Either you're spending too much to produce it, or quality's not there and the customer will not accept the results. But we have a pretty diverse range of production capabilities, so we need to make sure that we look at our entire line, from producing single signs all the way to doing 100,000 runs on our litho presses. So we look at that, we see where there gaps are in production capabilities, and we look for equipment that would fit in and fit those gaps. And with every equipment that we have, we try to create multiple setups. So when you give a piece of equipment, we'll have a high quality setting, a higher speed setting, so that you can just service a wider range of the market in terms of quality versus speed.
The easiest way to kind of address this, balancing production speed and quality. If it's a customer that you're already servicing, you know what they're used to, and you know the level of what they expect. The question that we address here, looking at it, is this something that you would pay money for? If you look at a job, whether it be wallpaper or wrap or just a little sticker job, would you pay for this? And if the answer is no, well, then that's how it directly affects your profitability. If you cut corners on speed to try to get the job out faster and you're just going to end up reprinting it, well, then it's a lose-lose. Your customer has come in to pick up a job, and it's not going to pass their quality, when in reality it shouldn't have passed your quality from the start. So you know what you're capable of printing, and you know, if you've had the machine for any period of time, how much time you really need to get that job printed. So once again, it kind of goes internal to yourself and your people as to balance the speed and the quality.
There's a wealth of information here amongst the three of us. And when I look at each of these individual questions, one kind of has something to do with the other. But at the end of the day, this speed and quality, or speed versus quality thing, though I'm going to speak to the vehicle wraps end of things again. Not necessarily do either one of those go hand in hand, depending upon the equipment that you have, either you possess now or you're looking at. And so, for instance, when we send our standard wrap out, we are printing at a quality speed of 540 by 540 with our color painter. However, my production speed of my color painter is superior to 90% of the printers that are out there in this segment. So what we have to balance is time is money in many cases here. So if my printer's busy all day and I'm printing in a quality mode or a high quality mode, obviously it's taking more time to generate my print. If I have the right quality printer, I could actually print in a production mode that is still faster than 2 or 3 times some of the machines that exist out there. So I do need to know how day in and day out will my machine create the same print over and over without me babysitting it and or it banding or it crapping out for some odd reason? So that's where you've got to look down into your equipment and your bandwidth that you have within your company and say, hey, I need to produce a certain quality that my customers expect, whether it is in a production mode or a quality mode. But obviously, you've got to find your lane of what they expect from you. So obviously, it's a fairly broad question, but it does still boil back down to what all three of us have been talking about. At the end of the day, how am I going to put money in my pocket, not in the trash can, and not spending it unwisely on materials that I didn't need, or maybe I did need economy materials. Maybe I need quality for this. Maybe I need less quality for that. But knowing what that lane is for each of those projects and how you roll every day is extremely important.
Finding a niche is really beneficial, but how do you go about finding one?
So in finding a new niche, with us anyways, it sometimes comes in two ways. One of them is just being reactive to maybe a customer that's from a new market or a new vertical, and basically we try to service them as best as possible, which takes us down the path of going down and fully servicing this niche, not just this one customer. So another way is to proactively go after a market that's new to us, and what we do is just make sure we understand the market, connect with it. We look for opportunities in this market that are being underserved. Things are not being done efficiently, or the quality is not good enough, or it's too expensive, whatever that underserved nature is. And then understanding strengths, or we have to develop strengths to serve that market better. So I mentioned like better quality or better pricing, which was kind of more evolutionary, or it can be totally disruptive, like building web applications to help with a very specific customer pain. Maybe there's a website that doesn't exist anywhere that can just service the customer better and disrupt that market. You can drive print sales. So this is kind of one of the things that we did with our China offices. That market was totally underserved from a quality perspective, so we went there to serve that market and also to help with the customers in the U.S. who wanted better quality in Asia. So that was an example of where we saw a niche that was good timing for us, and we went for it.
Well, I can speak to this in that I started as a one-man shop in my house with a cutter, and my niche market was going to be in the school industry. And I had done work for years in the screen print industry and had a good amount of contacts, and then I did a number of years doing fundraising for high schools. So I knew all the high school coaches in my area pretty well, and I had a good relationship with them. So that niche was going to be kind of going into the schools and selling them banners and stickers and stuff like that. And really quickly, I found out that just through the source of me doing it, there was one little niche there, but I'd also found out that, heck, it was really hard without having a sales force to go into it because there wasn't the numbers there that was going to support it for me. To go out and spend the whole day to go out and get $200 or $300 or $400 worth of sales wasn't going to do it. And so I was kind of looking maybe for somebody to partner with and realized that that kind of shop didn't exist. And that's where I started driving then towards my niche was going to be I was going to provide print services for shops or people that just already had the artwork done in files, and I was just going to try to drive that. I did some research on it and found out there was really nobody there around that was doing that. There were sign shops, but there was nobody locally anyway that was designed to just do print for other people. And so that's where that niche came into effect for me, and I developed relationships with a large number of sign shops in my area and just kind of developed that niche of having equipment that the normal shops wouldn't have and always being able to provide a next level type item for the local person.
You know, for us, and again, the echo of vehicle wraps, that's how we started and identified our niche in the industry. However, here, go back 15 years ago, is if I had to do it over, I probably would have set my sights a little differently with what I know today. Obviously, many of us probably could rethink quite a few things that we've done. But at the end of the day, we were able to go back into a fallback position, which I'll describe where we started and where we ended up. When we first started, when someone would say there was a wrap, that was something that you eat when we first started. So us coming from the automotive industry first and the print industry a distant second, what I identified as a figment of my imagination at this point is that since no one knows what this is, I'll spend my money, my dime, and my efforts to let the world know that our company, Ape Wraps, is in the wraps market, and the wrap is not something that you eat. Well, unfortunately, I probably shouldn't have been the one spending the money in retrospect. It should have been the material manufacturers and the printer manufacturers and equipment manufacturers of the world letting the end user know that, hey, there's a whole new world out there to personalize your program, whether it's your car, your laptop, or your phone, or any of those things. And so in retrospect, after all the money that we spent, what I did find, going back to something I mentioned earlier, is that the amount of money that we spent on developing that big, broad lane was not in our best interest, and we should have stayed in our own backyard and developed our program and used our monies wisely in developing our niche here. Because the niche always existed. Vehicle wraps, there was a demand, and we were growing it. But if we would have concentrated in our own backyard, we probably wouldn't have spent so much money educating literally a deaf program out there. So obviously 16 years forward now, we found that a wrap is not something that you eat anymore. So at the end of the day, identifying that niche and your bandwidth within your company to be able to provide a certain level of expectations to the client, that's what you should probably focus on. And, hey, the wraps business is a big deal. It's a huge market segment right now, and there's room for everybody.
Hear, hear.
If you already have a new market or niche in mind, what should you do first?
So it's important to see who the major players are in the niche that's new to you. Understand the market really well and how it's being served by the players, and understand how the market can be better served. You want to assess the risks and make sure that your decision fits your risk management style. You want to then, once you've decided to go into it, you obviously have to prepare to service the market and develop a marketing promotion strategy to tell the story. Like Troy mentioned, it's beneficial to partner with a manufacturer to help promote the ideas, because I think they have a shared interest. They obviously have a shared interest in making sure that this market flourishes and they themselves can sell as much product as possible. And my final piece of advice is don't wait, because things change quickly, and the market that you think that you have an opportunity there right now may change or may cease to exist in a short amount of time.
So if you have an idea in mind, we all have ideas, but the million-dollar question is this going to be something that's going to make me money, or is it a new division or a new direction that's going to make money, or is this kind of going off in a completely separate manner? I mean, if you have something in mind, number one, are you going to be able to get your point across to where people will know what it is, and number one, and number two, will want it, and do you have the financial ability to get to that road? Troy mentioned putting a whole bunch of effort into making everyone know what wraps were. And that was a great example, because I was one of the people that was listening. When he was at the forefront of it and they were at the forefront of it, I was astounded at where they were going and what they were doing. I thought they had a partner helping them with it, but it even makes me appreciate and respect him even more, knowing that he was doing it on his own. And looking forward, do you have the abilities to take that niche to where it needs to be, is the easy answer to that question.
Yeah, so it can get real expensive, huh? Yeah, if you didn't know, yeah, there was a lot of zeros behind all that effort. But I do need to say that value-added sites, and let's just take today, for instance, and I always speak to where my strengths are, is the vehicle wraps market. So the big thing today is color change, which is really kind of out of our wheelhouse of what we're discussing today. But for a lot of people, if you think about it, to get someone's feet in the pool or a foot in the pool, that color change business is literally a business in a box. But that surely doesn't compensate for having a business-like attitude and waking up and smelling the coffee every day and all these things that come with it. Just because there's a business in a box doesn't mean that there's other things that you've got to keep your eye on. For instance, the companies that will probably make the most money in the color change business, quote-unquote, the business in a box, will be the material manufacturers. They'll always be in the sweet spot. As business grows, their volume will grow. The downside of it that we need to recognize is that the saturation level for the business in a box, there will become many of them. So ultimately, it's going to affect your margins, and it's going to affect your future. So if you're not prepared for that future, it's probably going to be a pretty cold day in short order. And I'm going to say within the next 3 years, everybody's going to be wishing that they kept their eye on the digital ball. And it's part of the thing with the education is saying, hey, I've identified a niche in the market that I can go do today, and I don't necessarily need to be a printer. But the point is that education for the right educators out there and or trainers or instructors, they need to be letting everybody that's buying a business in a box know that if you don't keep your eye on the digital ball, when the saturation level hits to the color change, you may be looking for another way to have to pay that rent and pay those employees and all of that. So my suggestion to you is that obviously get your foot in the pool. If that's what it takes to go in the color change business, then so be it. But by all means, I think the three of us are telling you right now, if you don't keep your eye on the digital ball, the potential of your days being numbered is very high.
And I think I want to add to that before we move on. I think that you seem to have a vision of the markets or how it should be, and you had a personal investment in it, and basically you didn't give up in pursuing that. So I think that's super important.
You know, obviously we can continue this without getting too deep in the weeds. We knew it was special. The wraps market was special, especially us being in the automotive paint and concourse car business. All of those paint jobs that we would only dream of because we knew it would be 6 months and $60,000 and only be 60% of what we could do in paint, that equated don't do it. And here comes the digital phase of things, and we're like, oh my gosh, the sky's the limit. All those paint jobs that we dreamt and designed and we came to that determination, literally we can generate this in over a 40-hour period, and now it's quote-unquote instant gratification. So the thing was is that it fell on deaf ears. Even when we started, I remember the magazines, we were making magazines left and right. The problem with it was is they'd say, what a great airbrush job. And here we're out 20, 30, 40, 50 grand to go out and create the platform for them in which to put those in those magazines, only to find out that it was a great airbrush job. So,
right.
So it's been a crazy ride, right?
Tell us about your experience with color painter printers. What has it allowed you to do?
Well, it's allowed us to create really great backlit and clear film products, something that's been a challenge with the other printers we had in our portfolio. We're getting much better color saturation and durability than the other products, so that's been really, really helpful for us. The machine itself has been very reliable and easy to maintain and operate, so in many ways it's a production house dream machine.
So one of the best experiences we had with our new color painter, the day we bought it, I had a customer called and needed approximately 1,000 square feet of vinyl printed, of which it would have taken me a long time to complete with my previous printer. I was able to do the job completely, let it set overnight. I came in super early in the morning, was able to laminate it, get it cut down, and the customer was able to come pick it up. So that wouldn't have been possible with my previous printer. And then literally the next day, I had a customer call and they needed a wrap printed for KTM, which was a bright orange color. And their customer just wasn't happy with the way the orange was coming out on their 4-color printer. So with our 8-color printer, we were able to turn around the first van wrap for KTM, and then it led to 7 more that we printed over the course of the next 3 weeks, I think it was. So we learned really quick that the speed and quality was better, and then we were able to get colors that other printers weren't getting right away.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I echo everything that both those guys said. In spades, I echo it because when we first started, our first mistake that we made was to buy an OSE printer, which was an Arizona, what was it, an 80 or a 90? I can't even remember the number of it. But the one thing that I did know is that I had to babysit every square inch of that printer. And that was a $50,000, $60,000 boat anchor when we bought it. ironically, in our own backyard here in Southern California, the manufacturer of the color painter existed. I didn't even know that it existed. They actually found us. So I had one of the first color painters ever on the planet. The difference between what I spent 50 grand on and what I spent 25 grand on a color painter, I can't tell you how it changed our world, from color gamut to speed, to quality, to consistency, to ink penetration, to us not even having to lift the hood on it. And that goes back 14 years ago. Now, fast forward to today, literally the color painter and what drives us today, all of those attributes are still there, and it's still a large format industrial piece of equipment. We're not in the grand format business. We're not in the ultra high volume, but surely the thing is that we are in the fleet business, and most of our clientele that exists, they want the same consistent product day in and day out. Therefore, my company needs to be able to produce it day in and day out without us bleeding through the process. So in summing this all up, when I say that our color painter is an industrial piece of equipment that I don't have to lift the hood on for a long time, and I'm talking 3-4 years, when I either print in quality mode or I print in production mode, I don't do banding or anything. It doesn't disintegrate after 6 months. So a lot of the printers that are out there that I have friends and acquaintances and people in the industry that call me and say, hey, this other printer I bought other than a color painter was great for 6 months, and now it's literally its own boat anchor. I would have to spend almost as much money to get it operating like it would when I bought it. So when you are looking for a printer or you're looking for where that niche is going to be, the objective is to find an industrial piece of equipment that my return on investment is tied to, and I have to lift the hood on the unit. So color gamut, all of those good things, all of that action together, at the end of the day, is my color painter has proved its return on investment 100 times over.
I would like to thank our speakers for sharing their knowledge on how to increase productivity and profitability, as well as our sponsor, Oki Data, and to those who have attended today's webinar. If you would like to rewatch or share this webinar, it will be available on Big Picture's website within 24 hours. Please visit bigpicture.net for details.